Okay, so my name is Fellwa Abahsain. I live in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and I go to MLS, which is Makers Learning School. My presentation today is about Islamic architecture, and I'll be focusing on how did Islamic architecture influence Western architecture. Before I begin, I'd like to tell you all the presenter's promise. So I'm not an expert, but I promise that I tried to learn as much as I could to satisfy my curiosity about this topic. Someone here might know more than me about this topic, so please correct me, ask questions, and contribute. But please do it nicely, as I'm a very sensitive person. And lastly, I am not trying to persuade you of my agenda or convince you to take action. My only hope is that my presentation might help you cultivate your own curiosities. Today, I'm going to be focusing on 3 things. First, I'll be telling you the history of Islamic architecture, and then we'll talk more about the classification. And finally, I'll go back to my main focus, which is what influences were made on Western architecture. So before I begin, I'd like to tell you all what led me to choosing this topic. While searching for a topic, I ventured back into my love for architecture. As I scrolled through the internet and came across multiple well-known pieces of art, such as the Taj Mahal, I found out that it was considered part Islamic in terms of architecture. Now that sparked my interest as to why, and then I began my research. Okay, now let's talk history. Islamic architecture can first be traced back to the 7th century when Islam first began. It encompasses both secular and religious styles from the early history of Islam to the present day. The Islamic world encompasses a wide geographic area, historically ranging from Africa and Europe all the way to Eastern Asia. This allows for a larger variety in the building materials and styles that were affected by the surrounding culture. Now, on your screens in front of you, on the top left, you'll see the Dome of the Rock, which was built in Jerusalem in 691 AD. Right under it is the Alhambra, which was built in Granada, Spain, the year 1358. And to the right is the Great Mosque of Samarra in Iraq, which was built in 847 AD. Now, these are all very well-known pieces of Islamic architecture, and if you ask anyone who is interested in this field, they can easily tell you all about these buildings. Now, Islamic architecture can be grouped into 4 main groups. The first one is a fort. On the top left, you'll notice that it is the Alhambra. Now, it is a fort. A fort is a defensive fortress, usually containing a palace. The Alhambra was built as the last fortress for the last Muslims to rule in Spain. Right next to it on the right is a tomb. A tomb was used to bury people, but tombs of this scale were usually built for royalty, although some were used by the family who built it. So, for example, in the case of this tomb, the tomb of the Samanids, it was built for a man named Ismaili Samani, who built it for his father, but was later buried in it as well. Now, on the bottom left is a mosque. The one you see in front of you is the Great Mosque of Damascus, which is in Damascus, Syria. Now, mosques are sacred and used for prayers. Right next to it is a palace. Now, palaces are often used as homes for the royal family occupying the area. Now, let's talk more about the classifications of Islamic architecture. What you see in front of you is an Iwan, which is the first thing I'll be talking about. An Iwan is a rectangular hall or space that's usually vaulted, walled on 3 sides with one open and entirely open. It's usually decorated with calligraphy bands, glazed tilework, and geometric designs. The one you see in front of you is in a madrasa in Uzbekistan. Next, a quba. A quba is a domed structure that's typically found in tombs or shrines. So it's that circular thing you see on top of the tomb. The third is a mihrab. A mihrab is a sort of niche in the wall that's usually found in mosques, and they indicate the qibla. Now, the qibla is the direction of the Kaaba in Mecca towards where Muslims should face when praying. The one you see in front of you is in a mosque in Iran. Finally, I'll be talking about the minarat. A minarat is a type of tower typically built into or adjacent to mosques. They're usually used to project the Muslim call to prayer, which in Arabic is called adhan, but they are also served as landmarks and symbols of Islam's presence. This one is in a mosque in Damascus. Now let's talk about how did Western influence in architecture begin getting influenced. Here's a small history lesson. Okay, so Islamic armies began conquering new land in the 7th and 8th centuries. In the map above, you can see how the armies originated from Medina and continued to spread across the land. The area I'll be focusing on is the Iberian Peninsula, which today is known as Portugal and Spain. During the Islamic reign over the peninsula, many things occurred. For starters, there was a need for a place of worship, so they began building mosques. They needed a fortress, so the Alhambra fort was built. And you get the point. Now let's skip ahead in time. During the 11th to 13th centuries, the Christians were successfully able to take back Spain. This led to the rulers ordering everyone to convert back into Christianity, which with no surprise created the need for churches. So now let's talk about the actual influences that happened. What you see in front of you is a cathedral called the Cadiz Cathedral. I really hope I'm pronouncing that right. Okay. Now, the reason why I chose to showcase this one is because it's a wonderful example of how the Muslim reign over Spain left so many imprints. You can see how the minarat and mihrab were still used due to how visually attractive they are. So what I circled in green are the qibba, the mihrab, and the minarat. Despite the Muslims leaving Spain, a lot of these small details were still left. Now, another example I chose is the Burgos Cathedral. Now, the reason why I chose this one was because it was built during the 15th and 16th centuries, long after the Islamic period of Spain. This is also shown by the way it was built. There are far less features of Islamic architecture. Now, despite there being far less, you can still notice how some are still there. For example, the minarat, which again are those small towers you see on the top. Now, these are two examples of cathedrals in France and in Italy. They are viewed from the inside, so you can see how all the archways, all the stained glass are still there despite being built in non-Muslim countries. Now, while I was researching, I came across these two videos, and I would really like to share a clip with you from the first one, as I really enjoyed learning about it. It provided me with so much information. Let me skip ahead a bit.
Merchants in Italy, trading with Cairo.
Can everyone hear?
Inspired by the pointed arcades of the Ibn Tulun Mosque, they funded the same style in their new cathedral. When a visiting Benedictine abbot saw the style, he liked it so much that he ordered the same for his monastery at Monte Cassino, as did the abbot of Cluny in France, even importing the same craftsmen and materials to make sure they got it right. Once Cluny, the most powerful church in all Europe, had them, the fashion was set. Soon, behind me is Canterbury Cathedral. To make sure they got it right. Once Cluny, the most powerful church in all Europe, had them, the fashion was set. Soon, Europe's medieval Gothic cathedrals like Canterbury and Notre Dame were covered in pointed and trefoil arches, inside and out, just like London's Big Ben and the Houses of Parliament were covered with them centuries later after the fashion came back in the Gothic revival.
All right, so that clip I just showed you was talking about how Islamic architecture was shown throughout the land and how it first began with that guy first setting as he owned one of the most important cathedrals. The second video showcases what exactly is Gothic architecture. So if you are interested in that instead of Islamic architecture, that provides a lot more information and such a good basic understanding of it. Now, these 6 books you see in front of you are very good sources in order to learn more about Islamic architecture. They are often used in universities and are taught to people throughout. Now, the one on the very top left is called Stealing from the Saracens, which actually talks about how most of the European architecture was stolen from Islamic architecture. So that is a very interesting one. This is a list of all the references I've used in case any of you would like to look further into any of these websites. So I have all the websites I use, all the books, and just any type of resource I used. And that's all. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed my presentation.